I cannot even begin to explain how hyped I was for this. Sure, this only got announced earlier this year, but we all kind of figured that this was gonna happen anyway after Crash came back with the Insane Trilogy. As you may recall, now give us Spyro the Dragon. Ha, you're welcome, internet. Hell, I have been excited at the mere concept of this once games like Ratchet, Jak, and Sly Cooper all got their HD trilogies on PlayStation 3. I have already said this a bunch of times by now, but the original Spyro the Dragon trilogy played an integral part of my childhood. And after the franchise went in, let's just say, a direction that I wasn't really a fan of, Spyro then became a mere optional character in the Skylanders franchise, spawning just the friendliest and not at all terrifying Halloween costumes. But then, they finally did it. The Mad Lads actually did it. Spyro the Dragon got the remaster treatment. Also, he blazed up with Snoop Dogg. What the hell?
Spyro Reignited Trilogy. I'm finna go play this right now. Get out my face, man.
What is happening? Activision provided me a review code for the Reignited Trilogy, and receiving that code was one of the most exciting moments I've had in recent memory. And after beating all 3 games and getting all of the trophies within a week of getting the code, I didn't really sleep much that week. I can go ahead and echo what basically everyone has said at this point. This is a fantastic package of 3 really good platformers that if you're nostalgic for it, or you just want to play them for the first time ever, there's no doubt that you should get this. It is a high recommendation. That's not exactly what we're here to talk about today, though. When we have a game that is a remastering of something from back in the day, I feel it's more important to take a look at the differences between both versions as opposed to grading the games like each one gets a proper review. I already went pretty in depth with all 3 games a while back, but in short, they're all great 3D platformers with a ton of charm and variety. And to say that that has all been maintained here in the Reignited Trilogy would be underselling it greatly. Like, wow, this game is so pretty. I didn't even want to move when I first landed in Artisans. I was too taken aback by how good it looked. It was then that it finally hit me like, wow, this is actually real. With all 3 games being worked on at basically the same time now, there is a level of consistency throughout all 3. Like that weird rolling move that I keep forgetting is in the first game, it's now in all 3. Okay. Each game now has a toggleable map. Spyro 1 has some skill points like 2 and 3 did. Sparks can point out missing gems from the start of each game. Thank the heavens. And even though I loved Carlos Alazraqui as the voice of Spyro in the first game, Tom Kenny reprises his role from 2 and 3 and now voices Spyro in all 3. That's very nice. And then graphically, I mean, just look at it, this is amazing. The level of detail in each and every world is pretty jaw-dropping, especially when compared to the source material. Special mention has to go to the lighting and the reflection work. Holy crap, it's so nice! The soundtrack has been redone as well, with this new dynamic touch. Basically, if you stand still, the music calms down. If you start charging, a galloping sound overlays the music. That's pretty cool. As a whole, the tunes to Spyro the Dragon are as good as ever, and even though I do like the idea of dynamic music, personally I opted to turn that off. In general, I also prefer the original tracks too. The new ones just feel a little too soft in my opinion, very noticeably so with a less powerful fireworks factory, but luckily, those original soundtracks are here as well. Perfect. And then any and all cutscenes are so much fun to watch. This is now a full-on animated cartoon, and anytime one of the cutscenes was playing, I had a huge smile on my face. Seeing these characters that I loved watching growing up with such fine detail and great movement, oh, it's so good. And then Sparks waves at you sometimes, and oh, it's so cute. I felt weird about him having legs, but then he waves at you, and I'm on board with this. Also, the little light bar on the PlayStation 4 controller changes color depending on what color Sparks is. How is no one else talking about this? Now, when discussing the presentation, this is where any of my complaints really come in. The load times between levels are nearly twice as long as they were in the originals. Now, I did see this coming after Insane Trilogy had long load times at launch as well. It's still disappointing to see. At least in these, you get to move Spyro around. In Crash, we just had to deal with Aku Aku floating around like, hey, you ready to play? Just give it like an extra minute, I promise. They also got rid of the whole gems flying across the screen thing. That's pretty lame. There are the occasional frame drops as well, which is not a huge deal, but what is annoying, who in the hell thought that this level of motion blur was okay? I have never had an issue with motion blur in the past. This is the first time that spinning the camera too quickly actually kinda messed with my eyes. Eventually, I did train myself to just like look at Spyro's butt when I spun the camera, and that did help, but that's not something I should have had to do in the first place. Listen, man, I already have bad vision due to video games. The last thing I need is Spyro of all games to make me update my prescription. Hopefully some of these things are ironed out in a patch or an eventual PC release, but hey, I had to deal with a blurry Spyro during launch. I am damn well gonna talk about it. And this part is pretty minor as well, but I think the credits were mishandled too. The sweeping landscapes from the original games, that was awesome, and it showed the locations from their respective games. Here, it's one uniform credits for all three games, and there is some cute concept art that I'm not gonna really spoil if you haven't seen it, cause it's really adorable, but then it just transitions into the typical credit scroll. That was kind of unfortunate. Obviously none of this hampers the overall experience, because otherwise, boy, Toys for Bob nailed this. Spyro controls so damn well. Like the originals did support analog control, but here he is just smooth as butter and an absolute joy to control. I was a little worried at first because the gliding seems to be a bit nerfed in terms of the distance that you can travel, but conversely, the charge jumps are kinda buffed. So eventually I was able to make any jump that the game asked me to do, I just had to change my mindset of how to tackle some of them. And once I did, man, jumping, gliding, hovering, it all came naturally. And now there is camera control on the right analog stick with shooting fire set to the back right button, which is honestly beautiful. I love this so much. But yeah, it may be too early to say if this is the definitive Spyro experience, but it is damn well close. Now that's all the general stuff out of the way. With the Spyro the Dragon trilogy, each game in said trilogy offered its own brand of original content and original ideas. So the fine folks at Toys for Bob, they had a lot of stuff to cover, so we're gonna go through each game individually, talk about some of the good, some of the bad. We're gonna go really in depth here. Let's just get started with the first one, Spyro the Dragon. Hey, remember when I said Nasty Nork was probably watching this interview on TV or something? Like how else would he be able to see this video feed? Ha! Called it! So Spyro 1 seems like it had the most care put into it. The original game is incredibly bare bones and aesthetically pretty flat and empty. You go into a level, you get the things, you go out, rinse and repeat. Obviously that is the same here, however, the creative liberties taken throughout the entire game really make this classic adventure shine. While every dragon in the original was basically just a recolor of another one, some of them even reused the same voice clips.
Thank you for releasing me.
You shut your damn mouth. Now every dragon is completely unique, with not only original animation that looks amazing and really good voice work, but new outfits and styles too. Every single dragon stands out with their own personalities, and even in some of their exit animations, they're just so full of life.
Spyro, it's great to see you, but I gotta go.
Some of the "thank you for releasing me" dragons even have modified dialogue.
You can always check your progress by accessing the guidebook through the pause menu.
Even the different balloonists, they speak too. Like, wow, okay. That totally threw me for a loop. And I have seen some people say that the Norks are now just a bit too ugly. Wasn't that the whole point? The entire premise behind the original game's plot is Nasty Nork being called ugly and then he goes on a rampage. I really wouldn't have it any other way. Really, everything in this game has been kept faithful to the originals. I love all of the modified enemy designs, and all of the credit in the world here. They even replicated some of the original's weird sound effects. Oh, I love it so much. But without a doubt, it's the landscapes that keep this game more interesting from start to finish. the levels just pop more than ever, and I couldn't help myself from just stopping and taking the world in. Like for example, Dark Hollow, it now doubles as a library. That's really neat. The same can also be said for the flight stages. There are some noticeable changes to how Spyro controls here. I've noticed that like the flame hitbox as well as turning speed aren't quite as precise as the originals, but before long I was knocking these stages out just as smoothly as I always do. And as for the boss fights, well, I mean, these guys have always been pretty lame. There's not much more you can do with them. You can't really alter what they've always been, a slight little obstacle in some of the game's shorter levels. Though like a cutscene or something introducing them would have been nice, instead of just them being there. And of course, that does mean we end off with a very easy chasing sequence with Nasty Nork, which, the end of the game is still pretty anticlimactic. But, at the very least, now I know what Blowhard is supposed to be. I really couldn't tell with this pixel vomit. So while the core gameplay of the original stays the same as we all expected, with it being pretty repetitive from level to level, the more interesting and varied artistic choices in regards to the levels and the freed dragons, as well as Spyro just feeling so much better to play as, this is definitely an improvement over the original. Literally the only part about this entire thing that kinda sucks is the enemies in Twilight Harbor. They man like these goo guns now. And say what you will about guns in cartoony games, but at least be kinda consistent. If Pinstripe can still rock his infinite ammo Tommy gun, I don't know why we gotta resort to, like, purple slime. That's very weird censorship. There is some nostalgic charm to the PlayStation 1, for sure, but man, this made me re-love Spyro 1 all over again. The first Spyro, much like the first Crash, had the strongest impression it had to make when it came to being remade. There were a lot of parts about the original game that just felt kind of outdated, and I think when it came to this remake, ooh, they damn well nailed it. But now we move on to the sequel. Spyro 2 added a lot to the core formula, so there's a lot of stuff I'm kinda worried about, but let's just see how they do. Time for Ripto's Rage. They didn't even call it Gateway to Glimmer in the European Reignited Trilogy. I guess America wins. Spyro 2 is a much more character-driven adventure. We are immediately introduced to 3 new characters as soon as the game begins. I bring this up because I really just want to reiterate how well animated this game is. Oh, they made Allura like super cute now. I love it. And then when you first dive into Summer Forest, oh man, the developers totally had to know that these hubs were totally beloved by fans. They are absolutely gorgeous and just as fun to explore as they always have been. So the main difference with Spyro 2 comes in a stronger variety of level themes and the addition of a challenge-based structure. With each world now having characters to inhabit it, there is a lot to consider here when it comes to preserving the original ideas behind each of them. Like with any of the other cutscenes in the game, each level is bookended with scenes showing the world's citizens having a problem, and then life after Spyro comes through and fixes things. And just like how they were on PS1, they are just as great here. Some of them have even been modified to make a little more sense. Like in the end of Hurricos, one of the Electrolls just like slaps the other one for no real reason. As funny as that was, I'm not gonna lie. Now, that no longer happens. Nice touch, makes a little more sense. The one guy in Magma Cone still burns a lava-filled death. Glad they maintained that. The guns, that's a little bit extreme, but dying from lava, it's for kids. Rest in peace, my guy. And since we've already confirmed that Spyro basically controls perfectly, the main point of concern now is if the different minigame challenges work as intended. And yeah, they pretty much nailed that too. It almost ends up being kind of uninteresting to talk about here because, like really, if you played Spyro 2 before, that about covers it. Nothing really stands out as being much better or worse than it used to be. If anything, some of the missions, like the infamous trolley one, are made a little easier. Like whenever you switch lanes, it slows you down a little bit, giving you just an extra second to judge where you have to go next. Makes the ride a whole lot more pleasant.
Trouble with the trolley, eh?
Not anymore, you big stupid idiot! The camera has also been altered for a few of the challenges too, sort of maintaining the standard game's camera instead of opting for these challenge-specific ones. It's minor and it never really causes any issue, so sure, good change. And going back to the character designs, man, I really just, I love them. I love them so much. Most of them still give off the same vibes as their original looks. The children in Scorch are a little weird looking, but I guess they were supposed to be standard human kids here, so fine. And then speaking of Scorch, poor Bombo got censored too. Now he's just Bob. Okay, fine, I guess I can accept that one. The name Bombo is a little bit more extreme. He still sucks too. And that same level of weirdness goes for Agent Zero too. I know he was kinda just like a blob of big pink flesh before, but I don't know. He makes me kind of uncomfortable now. And while the voice acting, for the most part, is top notch, some of the purposefully bad voice acting in Zephyr, I kinda miss it.
Romeo! Romeo!
Wherefore art thou, Romeo?
It's like they missed the whole point of those characters sounding bizarre.
My pencil!
My pencil!
Okay, no, you've made that objectively worse. And then there's the dancing skeleton. You remember that thing, right? It was pretty funny in the original. Well, now he flosses, and the music has air horns in it. Oh, it's gross. Oh, hey, Wumpa Fruit. Nice. Essentially, when talking about Spyro 2, for the most part, the high bar of quality from the original has been maintained, and many of the issues are really just nitpicks due to nostalgia kicking in. That being said though, I did have a couple of problems here. The cameras for the boss battles could be a little bit better. Gulp in particular got way too much of a difficulty spike, I'm not sure why that is. Thankfully though, the Ripto fight is still really cool. Was pretty worried about that, I'm not gonna lie, that's one of my favorite fights of the trilogy. It's just as awesome as ever. Thank goodness. Oh yeah, and now when you have a power-up, Spyro's entire design changes. Oh, that's so cool. There's also a pretty noticeable difference when it comes to swimming too. For as perfect as the rest of the game feels, for some reason, they added this weird inertia system to swimming, where Spyro now slows down to a stop and leans into his turns, rather than just having super sharp movement. I was able to make do with it for the most part, but it's a surprising misstep. This same inertia idea is present during the flight levels as well, but again, I was able to make do. In those, a lot of the turns that you make are broad enough to where I'm totally fine with somewhat sluggish movement. It's not ideal, but I can do it. They also didn't fix the crap where if you do the stupid alchemist mission before getting the headbutt, you have to do it again when you do get the headbutt. That is literally the worst part of the game. Why did you not change that? Top 10 most annoying characters in video games. Number 1, the alchemist. Ultimately, Spyro 2 had the least amount of work put into it since, in my opinion, it was the one that needed it the least. Controls for basically everything, aside from swimming, are damn near perfect, the quality of challenges has been maintained, the game looks and sounds incredible as did the first game, and barring the censorship in Colossus,
I think you should torch that Yeti.
I think you should kill that Yeti.
oh my god, dude. Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage is still a great time. They did remove that sick double jump exploit though. I knew they were gonna. Like, it's obvious, it's a glitch, it's not supposed to be in there. It still stings. And now we move on to Spyro 3 Year of the Dragon. You see, when it comes to the trilogy thus far, the first game had a lot of stuff it had to add to make it level with the other two games. Spyro 2 just kind of had to maintain and simply be better looking and better playing. Spyro 3 though, there was a lot more added to this one. It is a beefy game. Alright, to prevent me repeating myself, I'll keep Spyro's part pretty short. For the third game in a row here, yeah, he plays exactly the same, meaning basically perfect. And just like in Spyro 2, the quality of minigames has been maintained as well, as have the modifications to the character designs. I was really hoping that we would get some sort of level opening and closing cutscenes like in the second game, but we didn't. Fine, I guess we'll keep it faithful. And yeah, once again, I am totally on board with most of these character design changes. They really all do feel like an upgraded version of their original selves, being similar and new at the same time. Like just look at Crazy Ed. I love him. He's my favorite design. Also, can I get a hello to Bianca, now looking like Lola Bunny from Space Jam? Certainly a whole lot better than... Yeah, but as we all well know, they added a ton of different gameplay styles into this third adventure. A handful of different vehicles, skateboarding of all things, and a bunch of new characters. This was the game I was worried about the most going into it, and thankfully, I can confirm, just like everything else in this package, they are all pretty great, if not just as good, meaning still slightly annoying, as the originals. Like the skateboarding, it is such a minuscule part of the entire trilogy. I was really nervous that this was gonna be bad, and some of the physics are slightly off, but it's more or less what we're used to. That being a not as good Tony Hawk Pro Skater clone. And yes, don't you worry your pretty little heads, you can indeed ride on a squid skateboard. Yo, these developers care. First up, Sheila the Kangaroo. She already played fine in the original, no major complaints here, but she still manages to control better in Reignited. She feels a lot less heavy, her kicks come out faster, her jumping, it just seems more satisfying. That could just be me. But yeah, no complaints in the original, no complaints here, she controls great. And she's also, like, super adorable. Oh my goodness, she has this really cute hairstyle now and this like ranger vest. Oh my goodness, I love it. Next up, there's Sergeant Bird. He still takes a little bit of time to get used to, but he is nowhere near as stiff as he used to be. And the rockets that he shoots seem to have a way stronger homing ability now, making combat way less annoying. He also, like, waddles when he walks. Oh my god, he's adorable too. Then we have Bentley the Yeti, my least favorite from the original. He is still pretty slow and clunky to play as. That's just how he is. But it's now presented with an over-the-shoulder camera. I like that, so I guess that's better, yeah. He's also a lot furrier this time around, so okay, sure, third time's the charm. He's more adorable too. And of course, we have Agent 9. Oh man, it's a third-person shooter now? With totally separate camera control, you can move one way and aim in another? Oh, you can aim up and down too? Like it's like an actual game now. Oh, this is so much better. Even the first person segment is way improved. Thank you. And adorable? All of their segments are simply better than they were before. So while it is still a little jarring that they added as many different gameplay styles as they did back in the day, I'm just glad they did the best with what they got. These are great. But then there's the matter of Sparks' levels too. Those segments are basically exactly the same. I was hoping that they would have adapted like a twin stick approach where you move with the left stick and then aim and shoot with the right, but whatever, it is what it is. Oh dear god, what the hell is that? That's okay, sure, yeah, alright. I will say though, for as much improvement as Spyro 3 got, the game also seemed to have the most issues between all three. Like, I mentioned before that the whole inertia while flying thing didn't really bother me a ton before, but then there's the twin dragon fight, and that was already annoying in the original, and now there's the worst flying controls. They made the fight more annoying. That's cool. And since now the speedways have racing missions as well, with a bunch of speed boosts that you have to go through to win said races, it further emphasizes that they really should have kept the sharp movement here. I had quite a few glitches pop up too, way more so than the other two. Nothing overly massive, though I did end up soft locking the game here as the puppy wouldn't go on the switch, so I couldn't progress until I killed myself. That was strange. The camera can sometimes goof up with Sergeant Bird in tight sections. That's annoying. Oh, and also, boxing with Bentley still sucks. There ain't nothing anyone can do to save that.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal.
But back on the positives, the boss fights are way better here than they were in Spyro 2. Look at how zoomed out the camera is for these. This is what Crush and Gulp needed. It's also nice that I get to see this one cutscene actually play in-game. I mentioned this in my Spyro 3 video, but since I don't have the greatest hits version, that cutscene just straight up doesn't play in the first release of that game. so I didn't even know it existed until like a few years ago. And yes, that means the greatest hits version of the soundtrack was used as well. I'm sure that's gonna make a lot of people happy. So as a whole, Spyro 3 Year of the Dragon was handled shockingly well. Like I said, this was the one that I was the most worried about. And as it turns out, Toys for Bob wasn't even too responsible for this one. Sanzaru Games, the makers of Sly Cooper Thieves in Time, was brought on board to handle all of these different gameplay styles. I'm assuming this was just done to speed up the development time, but thankfully, they did a pretty great job. And actually, if I'm being totally candid with you, I may end up liking Year of the Dragon more than Ripto's Rage in this collection. Like, the issues that I had with the PS1 release was that the entire game kinda felt disjointed. A good chunk of the segments with the new characters just felt kinda janky and maybe even rushed, which, like I mentioned already, has been addressed. And as minor as it was, I didn't like how each of these portals had a loading screen to go along with them. I like exploring these worlds for exploration's sake, not just finding a portal and then waiting for the minigame to load. But now the load times are almost instantaneous, making everything just so much more seamless. It feels really good. Guys, Spyro the Dragon's back, and that feels really good. So, yeah. I had a lot of stuff in mind, a lot of things I wanted to say about the Spyro Reignited Trilogy. It had mighty big boots to fill, and I do think Toys for Bob really nailed what they were setting out to do. This isn't just, hey, it's another classic game getting the remastered treatment, oh joy! This is pure nostalgia treated with the love and care that, quite frankly, it deserves. And it's really, really, really awesome. Ripto's Rage was already my favorite going into the Reignited Trilogy, so I'm happy with what I got here. I really didn't expect much more out of that one. Spyro 1 and Year of the Dragon, on the other hand, got massively improved, so while it may feel kind of uneven that Spyro 2 didn't get as much of an upgrade, to me, I just look at it as all three games now being on equal footing. I'm really not sure how I would end up ranking each of these games in this collection. It's a little bit too soon for me to fully tell. But what I can say is, a few issues aside that will hopefully be patched out, Toys for Bob and Sanzaru Games completely knocked this out of the park. Spyro the Dragon, Ripto's Rage, and Year of the Dragon. The Reignited Trilogy is an excellent way to experience these classics, and I can only hope that this leads to a bright future for good old Purple Boy here. It is long overdue. So I did end the Insane Trilogy video asking for Spyro, and then we got Spyro. So clearly I have some magical powers here that I didn't know I had. I need to pull from that again if I want to get another classic game remade from the ground up. Okay, let's see here. We got Crash, we got Spyro, Medieval, Wipeout is a thing. Also, can't forget about that. What else? Oh, Ape Escape. There you go, give us Ape Escape. Ape Escape, the Recaptured Trilogy. Rolls right off the tongue. You can take the name. I won't ask for royalties. I think this one's next. Sounds good to me. Yeah, that's all I got. I'm gonna go play these Spyro games again. Bye.